The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one who seems threatening or dominant. It's the one smiling, agreeing with everyone, and acting like they don't care about power. Because the book that's quietly been read by CEOs, politicians, and even prison inmates for 30 years says that person is playing the game better than anyone else in it. Robert Greene spent years digging through history to prove it. Everyone wants power. But in a world that demands you look fair, humble, and nice, admitting that gets you crushed. So the smartest people learn to hide it. Even acting weak, playing the victim, staying silent aren't the absence of a power move. They are the power move. Greene calls it the courtier's game. Centuries ago, the people closest to kings and queens couldn't fight in the open, so they learned to attack with a smile and a compliment instead. Sound familiar? It's still exactly how your office, your group chat, and your family actually work. We just don't call it that anymore. Let's take a deep dive into this knowledge, pulled from the recurring patterns of 3,000 years of strategists, spies, seducers, and con artists into 48 laws of power. And by the end of this video, you're going to recognize at least one you've already broken and probably paid for. Law 1 warns that you should never outshine the person above you, whether that is a boss, a teacher, or a leader. People in power want to feel important, smart, and secure in their positions. If you try too hard to impress them by showing off your own brilliance, talent, or wealth, you might accidentally make them feel insecure or jealous. When powerful people feel threatened by your achievements, they will find ways to hold you back, replace you, or even ruin your career. To protect yourself, you should always make your leaders look good and let them take center stage. A classic example of breaking this rule involves Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France. Fouquet wanted to impress the king to secure a big promotion, so he threw the grandest, most expensive party in history at his luxury castle. Instead of feeling flattered, the king felt completely outshone and embarrassed that a servant seemed richer and more popular than him. Right after the party, the king had Fouquet arrested and thrown into prison for the rest of his life, later using Fouquet's own architects to build an even bigger palace at Versailles. On the other hand, the famous scientist Galileo Galilei knew exactly how to follow this law. When he discovered the 4 moons of Jupiter, he did not just take all the credit for himself or give his inventions away as plain gadgets. Instead, he dedicated the discovery to the wealthy Medici family, claiming moons were a sign from the heavens created specifically to honor their dynasty. By making his supporters look like stars, Galileo gained their full financial backing and a high-paying job for life. The main point is to handle the ego of those above you with great care. If you have a brilliant idea, present it in a way that gives credit to your leader, or ask for their guidance so they feel needed. By muting your own ego and letting your boss shine, you gain their trust. Stay safe and build a strong foundation to reach your own goals. Law 2 advises extreme caution when relying on friends and highlights the strategic value of using enemies. Friends are prone to envy, frequently conceal their true feelings, and can feel burdened or patronized by your favors. Over time, generosity often breeds ingratitude rather than loyalty. Former enemies, however, have everything to prove. When forgiven or hired, they usually demonstrate far greater devotion because they expect nothing and are eager to validate your trust. The danger of over-trusting friends is illustrated by the Byzantine Emperor Michael III. He elevated his best friend, Basilius, a humble horse trainer, to chief counselor and army commander, showering him with titles and wealth. Instead of remaining grateful, Basilius grew greedy and ambitious. He murdered the emperor's uncle, amassed more power than Michael himself, and eventually assassinated the emperor to seize the throne. Michael's affection blinded him to the envy and ambition growing right beside him. Conversely, Emperor Sung of 10th century China demonstrated the wisdom of transforming enemies into allies. Recognizing that military friends frequently plotted coups, Sung persuaded his generals to retire peacefully to luxury estates, safely removing them from power. He then showed unexpected mercy to defeated enemy kings who had actively conspired against him. Touched by his generosity and relief, these former rivals became his most loyal vassals, helping Sung break China's cycle of coup and establish a 300-year dynasty. Enemies also keep you sharp and alert. As leaders like Mao Zedong and Abraham Lincoln understood, facing or winning over a strong opponent forces growth and defines your cause. While friends may occasionally be used for sensitive tasks or as scapegoats, competence and mutual self-interest are far more reliable than personal affection. To secure power, keep friends for companionship, but rely on skilled individuals and transformed enemies to achieve your strategic goals. Law 3 commands that you keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the true purpose behind your actions. If opponents have no idea what you are planning, they cannot prepare a defense, allowing you to guide them down the wrong path until it is too late to react. One major way to conceal your purpose is by using decoyed objects of desire and red herrings to throw targets off the scent. Because humans naturally trust appearances, dangling a decoy goal or displaying false sincerity easily misdirects people. For example, courtesan Nanon de l'Enclos instructed the Marquis de Sévigné to seduce a countess by pretending to only want friendship and using other women as decoys to spark jealousy. However, the Marquis ruined the strategy when he impulsively confessed his true love, revealing his intentions and alienating the countess. In contrast, Otto von Bismarck successfully hid his intentions by giving a speech defending Austria and advocating for peace, even though he secretly wanted to crush Austria and unify Germany. This fake peaceful stance won him the Prussian king's trust and a cabinet position, which Bismarck eventually used to build up the military and wage the exact war he originally planned. Another way to conceal your intentions is by using smoke screens, which use a bland, ordinary, or noble exterior to lull targets into a false sense of security. Because people can only focus on one thing at a time, a familiar front prevents them from noticing the trap being prepared behind the scenes. Master con artist Yellow Kid used a routine real estate deal as a smokescreen to distract businessman Sam Giesel, allowing Weil to swindle him out of $35,000 in a fake fixed boxing match. Similarly, Haile Selassie adopted a submissive, gentle exterior and invited his rebellious rival, Djazmach Balcha, to a grand honorific banquet. While Balcha was distracted by the hospitality, Selassie's forces quietly bribed and disarmed Balcha's entire 10,000-man army nearby without firing a shot. Finally, if you already have an established reputation for trickery, playing naive will make you look like a hypocrite. In such cases, it is better to act as an honest rogue or use loud, colorful spectacles to dazzle your audience. Law 4 emphasizes that power requires controlling your tongue, as saying less than necessary makes you appear more impressive, mysterious, and in control. Speaking too much reveals your weaknesses, weakens your authority, and drastically increases the risk of saying something foolish. The danger of uncontrolled speech is demonstrated by the Roman hero Coriolanus. Though revered for his military prowess, his entry into politics exposed his arrogance. Instead of maintaining his legendary aura, Coriolanus delivered insolent speeches that insulted the common populace and openly attacked democracy, which turned the citizens against him and ultimately resulted in his permanent exile. Conversely, King Louis XIV of France mastered silence as a tool of absolute authority. When presented with political arguments by his ministers, he would simply listen and reply with a brief, inscrutable, "I shall see." This refusal to over-explain left courtiers off balance and forced them to reveal their own motives while trying to fill the silence. Modern figures like Andy Warhol similarly leveraged brevity, making vague statements that forced others to project profound meaning onto his work. Furthermore, loose speech can carry fatal consequences, as seen when the rebel Kondraty Rylev survived a botched execution, but mocked the quality of Russian rope. Upon hearing of the insult, Tsar Nicholas I revoked his pending pardon and ordered him hanged again. However, there are moments when absolute silence can arouse unwanted suspicion or make superiors feel insecure. In such situations, adopting a garrulous persona can serve as an effective smokescreen, masking your cunning by making you appear harmless, talkative, and unsophisticated. Nevertheless, the overarching rule of power remains. Treat your words as a precious resource, keeping others guessing while protecting yourself from self-inflicted harm. Law 5 states that reputation is the essential cornerstone of power, enabling you to intimidate and prevail without expending excessive energy. Because people naturally judge others based on outward appearances, a carefully crafted reputation protects you, amplifies your strengths, and creates an aura of respect or fear. Once your reputation slips, however, you become instantly vulnerable to attacks on all sides. The immense force of reputation is illustrated by the Chinese general Zhuge Liang. Trapped in a town with only 100 soldiers while facing Sima Yi's 150,000-man army, Liang threw open the city gates, sat on the wall in Taoist robes, and calmly played his lute. Knowing Liang's legendary reputation for unmatched cunning and elaborate traps, Sima Yi assumed it was a trick and ordered a full retreat, allowing Liang's reputation alone to defeat a massive army without firing a single arrow. To build a formidable reputation, you should base it on a single outstanding quality, such as efficiency, honesty, or audacity, that sets you apart. Showman P.T. Barnum demonstrated how reputation can be established and used to dismantle rivals. Lacking a reputation early in his career, Barnum secured the purchase of the American Museum by launching a newspaper campaign that sowed doubts about his competitor Peale's financial solvency. Later, when Peale tried to compete with scientific hypnotism acts, Barnum staged hilarious parodies that ridiculed the performance, ruining Peale's credibility while cementing Barnum's own reputation for brilliant showmanship. Sowing doubt is an effective tactic for newcomers seeking to weaken an opponent, while gentle satire allows established figures to undermine rivals without appearing bitter. When managing your reputation, you must guard it vigilantly against potential threats. If your image becomes stained, associating with someone of pristine standing, like Barnum bringing singer Jenny Lind to America, can elevate your public standing. Conversely, overreaching in attacks against others can backfire, as seen when Thomas Edison's brutal electrocution experiments to discredit Nikola Tesla's alternating current damaged Edison's own image. Ultimately, there are no exceptions to this law. Neglecting your reputation allows others to define you, making its preservation vital to maintaining power. Law 6 asserts that appearance determines value. In the pursuit of power, what is unseen counts for nothing. To succeed, you must stand out from the crowd and court attention at all costs, recognizing that any form of notoriety, whether positive or scandalous, is far better than being buried in oblivion. P.T. Barnum mastered this principle through bizarre spectacles, such as employing a beggar to endlessly lay bricks on sidewalks to lure thousands into his museum, or fueling national debate with outrageous hoaxes like the Fiji mermaid. To capture the limelight, you must attach your name to a distinct image, challenge prominent figures for instant visibility, or stage dazzling visual displays, as Thomas Edison did to overshadow his rival Nikola Tesla. Crucially, you must constantly reinvent your approach, much like Pablo Picasso altering his artistic style, to prevent the public from growing accustomed to your presence. In an increasingly predictable world, cultivating an enigmatic persona captivates people by inviting constant interpretation. Margaretha Zell transformed herself into Mata Hari by inventing exotic origins and performing veiled dances using an air of mystery, to elevate her status far beyond her actual dancing ability. Practicing silence, subtle ambiguity, and unexpected actions creates an intimidating presence that can even disarm opponents. During the Second Punic War, Hannibal escaped a Roman trap by tying lit torches to thousands of oxen horns, creating an unexplainable night spectacle that terrified sentries into abandoning their posts. However, as you rise to power, you must adapt your methods so the public does not tire of your tactics. An air of mystery must remain controlled and playful, because pushing dishonesty too far transforms intrigue into a dangerous reputation for deceit. Law 7 advises using the knowledge, wisdom, and legwork of other people to advance your own cause, saving valuable time and energy while projecting an aura of godlike speed and efficiency. Attempting to do all the work yourself merely exhausts your forces, leaving you vulnerable to opportunistic rivals who will happily capitalize on your labor. Nikola Tesla tragically exemplified the failure to grasp this reality. Despite inventing the alternating current system and laying the technological foundation for radio, Tesla focused solely on creation rather than securing credit. As a result, figures like Thomas Edison, George Westinghouse, and Guglielmo Marconi claimed the glory and financial rewards, leaving Tesla impoverished. Edison, by contrast, succeeded as a businessman by hiring brilliant minds to produce inventions under his name. Similarly, explorer Balboa endured years of hardship discovering the Incan Empire, only for his soldier Pizarro to execute him and claim the conquest. To practice this law effectively, you can hire skilled individuals and place your name atop their creations, much like the painter Peter Paul Rubens, who employed specialized artists in an assembly line studio while taking credit for the finished masterpieces. Alternatively, you can stand on the shoulders of historical giants, utilizing ancient wisdom, past strategies, or speechwriters to appear effortlessly genius without wasting time on trial and error. However, you must always protect your ongoing work ruthlessly until your claim is secured, lest others steal it out from under you. Finally, caution is required when applying this principle around superiors or when your power base remains fragile. Prematurely grabbing credit can make you look deceitful or threaten those above you. As Henry Kissinger demonstrated by letting President Nixon take the primary glory for the historic trip to China, adroitly giving credit to a superior protects your standing while allowing you to capitalize on the labor of those below you. Law 8 asserts that true power comes from forcing others to react to your moves rather than constantly chasing after them. When you make an opponent come to you, you maintain control, force them to abandon their plans, and wear down their energy. Misinterpreting aggressive action as effective action leads leaders to exhaust themselves. Master strategists retain power by remaining calm, controlling their emotions, and dangling irresistible bait to exploit their opponent's desires. Foreign Minister Talleyrand demonstrated this when dealing with Napoleon. Recognizing that Napoleon's ambition threatened Europe's stability, Talleyrand quietly orchestrated a trap by feeding the exiled emperor false promises of European support and glory. Baited into escaping Elba, Napoleon reclaimed France, but his depleted forces were swiftly defeated at Waterloo, resulting in his permanent exile to St. Helena. By luring Napoleon into taking the bait, Talleyrand dictated the exact timing and location of the emperor's final downfall. Luring opponents into your chosen territory yields significant strategic advantages. The journey exhausts their energy, while operating on unfamiliar ground makes them anxious and prone to errors. During the 1905 Russo-Japanese War, Japanese Marshal Togo baited the Russian Navy into sailing over 6,000 additional miles on high combat alert, allowing the rested Japanese fleet to easily crush their fatigued opponents. Furthermore, effective baiting creates a convincing illusion that the victim is driving the situation. Financier Daniel Drew manipulated buyers by accidentally dropping fake stock tips from his handkerchief, just as pickpockets post warning signs to induce people to check and reveal their wallet location. Even overt manipulation can force others' hands. Architect Filippo Brunelleschi feigned illness to expose his co-designer's incompetence, compelling city officials to fire his rival and come begging for Brunelleschi's help. However, a key reversal exists. If time is against you or your enemy is significantly weaker, a swift, aggressive strike can demoralize them before they have time to think or recover. Law 9 warns that any victory won through argument is merely a Pyrrhic triumph, as the resulting resentment and ill will endure far longer than any temporary agreement. Words are easily distrusted and misinterpreted. Physical demonstration creates unassailable proof without making others defensive. Arguing with a superior is especially perilous because it impugns their intelligence and triggers insecurity. An ancient Roman military engineer learned this lethally when Consul Mucianus ordered a large mast for a battering ram, The engineer argued endlessly that a smaller mast was superior and sent it despite explicit orders. Enraged by the impudence, Mucianus had him flogged to death. In contrast, Michelangelo demonstrated the power of indirect action when Mayor Soderini claimed the nose of the David statue was too large. Rather than arguing, Michelangelo led Soderini up the scaffolding. Michelangelo pretended to chisel the nose while dropping pre-gathered marble dust, and altered nothing. Believing his advice was taken, Soderini was delighted, and the sculpture remained untouched. Demonstrating your point can also leverage visceral experiences or symbolic gestures. Sir Christopher Wren satisfied a nervous mayor by erecting support columns that secretly stopped just short of the ceiling, preserving his original design while easing fears. When a heckler challenged Nikita Khrushchev for failing to stop Stalin, Khrushchev barked, "Who said that?" When terrifying silence blanketed the room, he quietly noted, "Now you know why," making the audience physically experience the fear of confronting a dictator. Similarly, Egyptian king Amasis melted a gold footbath into a sacred statue to visually prove how humble origins can transform into something worthy of reverence. However, a vital reversal exists. Verbal argument is an effective tool when practicing deception or covering up a lie. Con artist Count Victor Lustig escaped a vengeful sheriff by fiercely arguing technicalities about his fake money-copying box. Lustig confused the man long enough to give him counterfeit bills, which led to the sheriff's arrest. Law 10 warns that emotional states are as contagious as physical diseases. The incurably unhappy and unstable often bring about their own misfortunes and draw disaster onto those around them. Attempting to rescue or pity these individuals only enmeshes you in their self-inflicted trouble. Therefore, power requires avoiding infectors and associating instead with the happy, fortunate, and buoyant. The life of performer Lola Montez illustrates the ruinous nature of an infector. Driven by inward instability, she destroyed virtually every man who brought her into his life. In Paris, newspaper publisher Alexandre Dujarier saw his business decline before dying in a duel linked to her. In Munich, she bewitched King Ludwig of Bavaria, sparking widespread riots, cabinet dismissals, and political chaos that ultimately forced his abdication. Subsequent lovers and publishers suffered ruined careers, bankruptcy, and premature deaths. Her lovers were drawn into her maelstrom because her intense personality made them feel alive. But her deep-seated instability ultimately destroyed them. Humans are naturally susceptible to the emotions, moods, and thinking patterns of their associates. Infectors often present themselves as victims, making it difficult to spot their self-destructive nature until you are already infected. For instance, the conspirator Cassius infected Brutus with his own pathological envy of Julius Caesar, drawing Brutus into a tragic conspiracy. To protect yourself, judge people strictly by their track record, such as a history of turbulent relationships and unstable careers, rather than their excuses. The only effective defense is strict quarantine. Conversely, positive traits are equally infectious. You can leverage emotional osmosis by associating with people who possess qualities you lack, just as Napoleon smoothed his rough edges by surrounding himself with the courtly Talleyrand. Gravitate toward the cheerful, generous, and outgoing to share in the prosperity they draw upon themselves. Unlike other strategic principles, Law 10 admits of no reversal. Ignoring it always leads to peril. To maintain true freedom and control, you must make others rely on you for their happiness and prosperity. Being merely competent or hardworking is a dangerous trap. Anyone easily replaceable can be discarded, imprisoned, or executed once their usefulness wanes. This was the tragic fate of Renaissance Italian mercenaries like the Count of Carmagnola, who won brilliant battles but was executed by Venice when he became too costly and independent. To survive and exercise power, you must entwine your fate with your masters so deeply that removing you would trigger their immediate downfall. Otto von Bismarck exemplified this principle by intentionally allying with weak Prussian monarchs rather than strong factions, making himself the indispensable spine of their reign. King William I intensely disliked Bismarck yet repeatedly yielded to his ministers' demands, because the king depended entirely on Bismarck's strength to keep political enemies at bay. Similarly, King Louis de Wide's court astrologer saved his own life when threatened with execution by claiming he would die 3 days before the king, instantly compelling the terrified monarch to protect him. Dependency can be forged through intensive power, such as Michelangelo's unique and irreplaceable artistic talent, or extensive power, like Henry Kissinger entrenching himself across so many government departments that removing him would cause total chaos. Alternatively, you can leverage a chain of dependence, demonstrated when studio executive Harry Cohn protected a suspected communist screenwriter, solely because megastar Humphrey Bogart refused to perform without him. Holding guarded secrets achieves a similar hold. Ultimately, it is far safer to be needed than loved. Affection is fleeting, but necessity is constant. Seeking absolute independence is a ruinous mistake that leads to isolation and hostile opposition. Instead, cultivating mutual dependence grants you ultimate leverage, allowing you to guide the master while avoiding the burdens of leadership. A single calculated act of honesty or generosity can disarm even the most suspicious targets, creating a distraction that masks dozens of dishonest moves. Known in ancient China as giving before taking, open-handed gestures, unexpected admissions, or timely gifts lower people's natural defenses and leave them vulnerable to manipulation. Selective honesty is especially potent during initial encounters, as establishing an early reputation for trustworthiness blinds targets to future deception. Con artist Count Victor Lustig famously used this principle against mobster Al Capone. After holding $50,000 of Capone's money for 2 months without investing it, Lustig returned every penny, apologizing that the plan had failed. Stunned by this unexpected act of integrity, Capone handed Lustig $5,000 out of sympathy, the exact payout Lustig had targeted all along. Similarly, Lord Gordon won financier Jay Gould's absolute trust by revealing phony stock sources, blinding Gould long enough to fleece him of millions. In Statecraft and War, Duke Wu of Cheng executed a minister who suggested invading an allied kingdom to prove his goodwill, disarming his target shortly before launching a surprise conquest. Likewise, the Greeks breached Troy with the Trojan horse, and Roman general Camillus disarmed the Phaliscans into surrendering by honorably returning kidnapped school children. However, if you already possess an established reputation for deceit, sudden honesty will only provoke suspicion. In these instances, playing the rogue or leaning into a dishonest persona is far more effective. When attempting to sell the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal, Lustig saved his scheme from a suspicious buyer by soliciting a bribe, which reassured the industrialist that Lustig was a typical corrupt official. Similarly, diplomat Talleyrand made absurdly candid statements to blur the lines between his real deceptions and fake ones. Crucially, calculated acts of kindness must appear sincere. If detected, the mark's gratitude will turn into intense hatred. When seeking assistance from an ally or superior, you must appeal to their self-interest rather than their mercy or gratitude. Reminding people of past favors creates an unwelcome burden of obligation that most will actively seek to discard. This mistake proved fatal for Stefano di Poggio in 1325. After quelling an insurrection against Lucca's ruthless ruler, Castruccio Castracani, Stefano surrendered his clan's weapons and pleaded for mercy based on his family's past support. Driven purely by self-interest, Castruccio eliminated the obligation entirely by executing the Poggio family. Had Stefano offered future political leverage, lucrative marriages, or financial gain, he might have survived. Conversely, appealing directly to tangible benefits yields immediate success. Prior to the Peloponnesian War, both Corcyra and Corinth sought an alliance with Athens. Corinth passionately recounted past favors and demanded gratitude, which only irritated the pragmatic Athenians. In contrast, Corcyra openly acknowledged past enmity but offered a practical advantage, combining their vast fleet with Athens' navy to intimidate Sparta. Athens overwhelmingly voted to ally with Corcyra. Similarly, advisor Yilu Chudzai saved Chinese cities from Genghis Khan, not by pleading for human life, but by appealing to Khan's greed, demonstrating how tax revenue and skilled artisans would yield immense wealth. To master this law, you must step outside your own needs and analyze the target's specific psychology. When Japanese ruler Ieyasu grew frustrated by Portuguese proselytizing, he favored Dutch traders who focused solely on mutual commercial and military utility. However, a critical reversal exists. Some individuals prefer exercising charity, mercy, and justice because it makes them feel morally superior. When dealing with people who value public nobility over practical gain, appealing to blatant self-interest will backfire. Instead, afford them a prominent opportunity to display their generosity and benevolence. Law 14 mandates gathering critical information on rivals and allies by acting as a spy under the guise of friendship. Knowing people's hidden motives, weaknesses, and tastes grants predictable control over future events. Art dealer Joseph Duvain weaponized this strategy to capture the business of reclusive industrialist Andrew Mellon. By bribing Mellon's staff to learn his daily routines, phobias, and aesthetic preferences, Duvain engineered a chance elevator encounter and accompanied him to an art gallery. By mirroring Mellon's specific tastes, Duvain made himself irresistible, dominating the art market while rivals remained baffled. While using paid informants yields valuable intelligence, spying personally during polite social encounters is far safer and more precise. French diplomat Talleyrand excelled at this by suppressing his own ego in conversation, prompting others to speak endlessly and inadvertently reveal their plans. He also leaked fake secrets, firing a pistol into the air to gauge diplomats' reactions and decipher their true motives. Effective spying tactics include sharing false confessions to draw out real secrets, pretending to believe a liar so they overextend into self-betrayal, or staging character tests like Persian King Chosroes II, who shared fake execution plans to test courtiers' discretion. However, you must also defend against others spying on you by using deliberate disinformation. Shielding your true intentions behind a wall of false intelligence effectively blinds your opponents. During World War II, British intelligence fed deceptive targeting data through double agents, causing Nazi V-1 rocket strikes aimed at central London to repeatedly land harmlessly in rural suburbs. While artful spying opens a third eye to see through others, disinformation puts out your enemy's eyes, ensuring they miss their target. Law 15 dictates that a feared enemy must be crushed completely in both body and spirit, as stopping halfway or showing mercy leaves smoldering embers that inevitably erupt into full-blown revenge. As Niccolò Machiavelli observed, people will seek vengeance for minor injuries, but are rendered powerless by devastating ones. Partial victories leave resentful adversaries who merely bide their time, meaning that total elimination or permanent banishment is the only true guarantee of long-term security. Chinese history vividly contrasts the perils of leniency with the necessity of absolute annihilation. General Xiang Yu repeatedly spared his rival Liu Peng out of nostalgic friendship and pride, allowing Liu to continuously escape, regroup, and eventually surround Xiang's forces. Heeding his advisor's warning that sparing a rival is like rearing a man-eating tiger, Liu Peng ruthlessly destroyed Xiang's army and drove him to suicide, founding the Han Dynasty. Centuries later, Empress Wu secured a 40-year reign as China's first female emperor by systematically eliminating every potential challenger, including rival concubines, generals, and her own children, leaving no one left to orchestrate a coup. Strategic military thinkers throughout history reinforced the necessity of total victory. Sun Tzu and Karl von Clausewitz emphasized that direct annihilation of the enemy's forces must be the primary objective, because any partial victory is easily lost at the negotiating table. A modern failure to observe this occurred when Chiang Kai-shek neglected to crush Mao Zedong's weakened forces following the Long March. That momentary reprieve allowed the communists to recover, eventually rout Chiang's army, and permanently exile his regime to Taiwan. The only tactical exception to this law arises when completely cornering an enemy forces them to fight with desperate ferocity. In such cases, offering a deliberate escape route causes retreating soldiers to exhaust themselves and disintegrate emotionally. Outside of this specific battlefield maneuver, showing leniency merely emboldens bitter opponents. Ultimately, power requires denying enemies any room to negotiate or recover, ensuring they are rendered entirely harmless. Scarcity creates value, while excessive presence degrades respect. Like currency in circulation, the more often you are seen and heard, the more ordinary you appear. Once you have established your status or secured someone's affection, a tactical, temporary withdrawal excites the imagination, raises your perceived worth, and transforms routine familiarity into deep admiration. Overstaying your welcome leads to disdain, whereas learning when to disappear forces others to crave your return. This principle applies across romance, politics, and power. The medieval troubadour Sir Guillaume de Boulogne demonstrated this by severing contact with Lady Guilelma. His sudden absence drove her into desperate longing, proving that distance fans the flames of emotion, while constant availability suffocates. Politically, the Median arbiter Dioceses leveraged strategic withdrawal to seize supreme authority. After making himself indispensable as an impartial judge, he abruptly retired, allowing lawlessness to engulf the land. Realizing they could not govern without his wisdom, the Medes begged him to become king. Once crowned, Dioceses secluded himself inside a fortified palace, accessible only through messengers. By remaining unseen, he turned familiarity into reverent awe, ruling unchallenged for decades as a divine figure. The power of withdrawal operates like economic scarcity, where restricting supply, whether of art, status symbols, or personal presence, instantly elevates value. Legendary figures like Emperor Charles V and actress Greta Garbo preserved their prestige by retiring at their peak rather than enduring public decline. Strategic absence creates a symbolic death before death, ensuring that any eventual return carries the weight of a triumphant resurrection. However, the reversal of this law dictates that timing is critical. Absence is only effective after an individual has firmly established a strong presence and earned respect. Withdrawing prematurely before securing recognition does not inspire yearning. It simply causes one to be forgotten. One must first become omnipresent before using scarcity to command honor. Law 17 establishes that deliberate unpredictability disrupts human reliance on habit, keeping rivals off balance and in a state of suspended anxiety. Because people naturally analyze patterns to predict actions and regain a sense of control, breaking those expectations forces adversaries to wear themselves out attempting to decipher your intent. By refusing to follow consistent logic or routine, you seize the psychological initiative, transforming erratic behavior into a formidable instrument of intimidation and control. The psychological power of unpredictability is vividly illustrated by Bobby Fischer's 1972 World Chess Championship victory over Boris Spassky. Fischer unhinged his rival by delaying arrivals, making seemingly absurd moves, and forfeiting a game. Spassky, accustomed to logical grandmaster play, completely unraveled under the psychological strain, growing so paranoid that he suspected mind control and chair tampering before finally resigning. Similarly, Confederate General Stonewall Jackson repeatedly used erratic troop movements in the Shenandoah Valley to paralyze vastly superior Union forces. While artist Pablo Picasso intentionally withdrew artwork from his dealer for no stated reason to trigger panic and secure higher offers. Unlike subordinates who remain trapped in rigid routine, powerful leaders leverage sudden shifts to command authority and reverence. As observed by ancient philosopher Hufei Tzu and demonstrated by Filippo Maria, Duke of Milan, keeping followers guessing prevents rebellion and forces absolute submission. Scrambling daily patterns creates an intriguing, formidable aura, making the practitioner seem like an unpredictable force of nature, akin to a sudden cyclone, against which opponents cannot formulate an effective defense. Conversely, predictability can be weaponized as a smokescreen to lull opponents into a false sense of security before striking. In his 1974 title fight against George Foreman, Muhammad Ali announced he would slug it out rather than dance around his opponent. Foreman dismissed the claim as a bluff, only to be caught completely unprepared when Ali executed that exact strategy. However, unpredictability must be applied judiciously. For subordinates, Erratic behavior risks appearing indecisive or unstable rather than powerful, making timing and status critical to its success. Robert Greene argues that power thrives on social interaction, circulation, and accessibility, declaring that isolating oneself in a symbolic or literal fortress is an incredibly dangerous mistake. When individuals feel threatened or paranoid, their natural instinct is often to retreat into a protected space, closing ranks and limiting their contact with the outside world. However, this defensive posture backfires by restricting their access to a shrinking circle of information, warping their sense of proportion, and blinding them to the reality of their surroundings. Rather than ensuring safety, a fortress transforms its builder into a highly conspicuous, easily identifiable target. It effectively severs the very connections, intelligence networks, and strategic flexibility necessary for survival and defense. Historical examples and allegories reinforce the fatal consequences of this self-imposed confinement. Shang Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China, became so terrified of assassination that he hid deep within a massive interconnected palace complex, only to lose true political control to scheming ministers and die entirely alone. Similarly, Prince Prospero mistakenly believed an iron-gated abbey could keep the fatal Red Death at bay, yet the contagion easily breached his walls and destroyed everyone inside. Even in creative pursuits, the painter Jacopo da Pontormo sealed off his chapel from the public for 11 years, resulting in an unproportioned, chaotic work that ruined his legacy. True security and power are maintained by embracing the world as an interconnected palace, similar to how Louis XIV structured Versailles to ensure every piece of court information passed directly through him. Figures like Cicero and Talleyrand sustained their influence by actively mingling across diverse social circles, making it impossible for enemies to isolate them or hide plots. A powerful figure must remain highly mobile, permeable, and tightly integrated into the crowd, using social arts and public presence as an effective shield. Although brief periods of solitude can offer temporary perspective for critical thought, prolonged isolation breeds perverted ideas and dangerous paranoia. Power ultimately demands constant exposure to the public streets. The ultimate skill in mastering power is the capacity to accurately gauge human nature and customize strategies accordingly. Because people respond differently to deception, manipulation, or slights, dealing blindly with whoever crosses your path is a recipe for disaster. Failing to distinguish between a harmless opponent and a volatile enemy can result in lifelong sorrow or destruction. Master influencers identify and avoid 5 exceptionally dangerous personality types. First is the arrogant and proud man, whose oversensitive ego drives him to exact disproportionately violent revenge for any perceived slight, illustrated by Lope de Aguirre tracking down a judge for over 3 years just to murder him over a public flogging. Second is the hopelessly insecure man, who harbors deep self-doubt and will slowly nibble an offender to death through petty calculated grievances. Much like the cattleman J. Frank Norfleet spending years and bankrupting his ranch to dismantle a national con artist ring out of pure embarrassment. Third is Mr. Suspicion, a paranoid archetype who assumes everyone is plotting against him, making him easy to trick by turning his fear toward others, though highly dangerous if you become his focus. Fourth is the serpent with a long memory, a cold strategist who hides his anger and waits years to strike back, mirroring how Prince Cheng-Ert destroyed the kingdom of Qing years after its ruler insulted his temporary poverty. Finally, the plain, unassuming, and unintelligent man poses a unique trap. Possessing a strictly literal mind without imagination, he simply cannot comprehend a subtle ruse. A good example of this is the art dealer Joseph Duveen, wasting immense resources, attempting to sell original masterpieces to a bewildered and tasteless Henry Ford. To secure power, one must never rely on instinct or surface appearances, nor ever inflict unnecessary contempt. If today's insignificant individual could become tomorrow's tyrant, it is vital to gather concrete intelligence on every target before acting. This law operates as an absolute rule. It contains no reversal. The ultimate preservation of power lies in remaining fiercely independent. declaring that only fools rush to take sides or commit to a cause outside of themselves. By withholding your total allegiance, you maintain control, capture the continuous attention of others, and force competing factions to pursue you. The strategy unfolds in two parts. First, becoming courted by all while belonging to none. Queen Elizabeth of Sarse masterfully used this technique by dangling the prospect of marriage to various foreign princes and domestic suitors for decades, creating a cult of devotion while utilizing these unfulfilled hopes to secure peace for England without ever surrendering her autonomy. Similarly, Alcibiades and Henry Kissinger successfully positioned themselves directly between rival powers, offering just enough hope of assistance to each side to ensure they were handsomely rewarded, regardless of which faction ultimately prevailed. Committing immediately destroys your aura of mystery, shifting your position from a highly desirable prize to a common lackey bound by obligation. The second half of this law mandates staying entirely above the fray. When surrounding parties engage in petty squabbles, the strategic move is to express mild, superficial support while keeping your emotions detached, allowing the combatants to exhaust themselves. Isabella d'Este excellently safeguarded the tiny state of Mantua against predatory neighbors like Venice, Rome, and France by deploying charm, letters, and deceptive double games, effectively letting her powerful rivals deplete their resources fighting one another. Preserving your autonomy grants the luxury of time to gauge which way the wind blows, allowing you to eventually step in as a mediator or take advantage of the weakened losers, as Castruccio Castracani did by promising aid to two opposing factions in Pistoia before invading and capturing the city for himself. Rushing into an alliance robs you of your initiative and maneuverability. True power demands that you conserve your time and energy, ignore emotional entreaties, and project a self-reliant pose that commands universal respect. Because no one likes to feel intellectually inferior, the ultimate trick in deception is to make your targets feel highly intelligent, specifically, smarter than you are. Human vanity is deeply tied to brain power, taste, and sophistication, meaning that an inadvertent insult to someone's intellect is an unforgivable and dangerous sin. Conversely, systematically reassuring people of their mental superiority completely disarms their suspicion and judgment. Philip Arnold and John Slack pulled off the biggest diamond mine hoax of the 19th century by acting like naive country rubes in front of sophisticated New York and San Francisco financiers, including Baron Rothschild and Charles Tiffany. Because the tycoons viewed the prospectors as simple-minded hayseeds, they never suspected an audacious scam, ultimately buying worthless mining rights for $700,000. By playing up a clodhopper image, the tricksters made the millionaires feel so intellectually superior that they eagerly blinded themselves to the fraud. Downplaying your brilliance is a powerful strategy across all fields. Otto von Bismarck secured an unfavorable treaty from Austria by recklessly losing thousands of thalers in a card game to the Austrian negotiator, Count Blome, who falsely concluded that Bismarck was merely a rash, aggressive fool incapable of cold calculation. The Chinese phrase, masquerading as a swine to kill the tiger, encapsulates this exact methodology, demonstrating how an appearance of utter harmlessness allows ambitious individuals to rise through a hierarchy undetected, much like Claudius did before becoming emperor of Rome. Posing as a fool disarms the arrogant and overconfident, giving you the time and proximity needed to turn the tables. While it is necessary to subtly demonstrate competence early in your career to advance, you should generally dampen your brilliance as you rise. The rare exception to this rule occurs when a dominant show of authority and expert knowledge is required to cover a blunder or escape a trap, illustrated by art dealer Joseph Duveen confidently browbeating a young critic to protect a questionable painting's authenticity. Robert Greene asserts that when faced with a superior adversary, fighting for honor is a fatal mistake. Instead, use the surrender tactic to transform weakness into power. True surrender is a calculated strategic maneuver where an individual outwardly bends while inwardly maintaining absolute resolve. Fighting a hopeless battle yields only martyrdom, as demonstrated by the island of Melos. Facing the mighty Athenian fleet, the Melians rejected peaceful terms out of blind pride and a misplaced faith in Spartan intervention. Consequently, the Athenians decimated the island, executing the men and enslaving the women. Had they surrendered, they would have preserved their population and gained the flexibility to sabotage Athens from within or revolt once their conquerors inevitably weakened. Lulling an enemy into complacency through apparent submission allows you to retain strategic control. When the playwright Bertolt Brecht was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee, he rejected the confrontational stance of his blacklisted colleagues. Instead, Brecht disarmed the committee through absolute congeniality, corporate attire, deferring to authority, and utilizing an interpreter to cleverly twist his revolutionary poems into innocuous prose. Delighted by his pseudo-obedience, the committee released him without penalty, enabling him to continue his writing. People trying to display authority are easily blinded by outward compliance. Satisfied that they are respected, they drop their guard against subsequent subversion, mockery, or counterattack. Yielding neutralizes aggression and avoids a chaotic cycle of overreaction, providing the close proximity required to study an oppressor. This is evident in King Gujian of Yu, who voluntarily served as a lowly stable servant to his conqueror for 3 years before capitalizing on a domestic crisis to destroy him. Similarly, 19th century Japan adopted Western advancements to foster internal strength rather than launch a suicidal military resistance. Surrender can even manifest as an over-obedience that renders authority entirely ridiculous. Because power is fluid, one must reject the unpredictable, terminal glory of martyrdom. Real victory requires staying alive until the pendulum swings back in your favor. Power is maximized by concentrating your forces and energies at their strongest point, as intensity defeats extensity every time. Empires and individuals alike invite collapse through strategic overextension. The ancient kingdom of Wu met ruin when its king, blinded by ambition, dissipated his armies across multiple fronts to conquer the Middle Kingdom. He ignored his chief minister, Wu Tsuachasiu, who warned that their southern border lay exposed to the predatory state of Yue. The king ordered his minister's suicide, only for Yue to swiftly invade and destroy the bloated kingdom. What expands beyond its proportions inevitably fractures, proving that a divided mind loses its purpose. Conversely, the Rothschild banking dynasty epitomizes the strength of absolute cohesion. Originating from the Frankfurt ghetto, the family achieved European dominance by excluding outsiders, utilizing a private courier network in an uncrackable Yiddish code, and institutionalizing intermarriage among first cousins to safeguard secrets. Operating like a synchronized watch, they resisted the dispersion of their era. In the game of power, single-minded focus is a supreme weapon against a distracted world. Foolish individuals scatter their efforts among various contacts, whereas the wise attach themselves to a single, powerful patron, a fat cow providing long-term security. Figures like Michelangelo and Galileo secured immense freedom by dedicating themselves to one supreme authority, eventually making their masters dependent on their services. However, specific tactical situations demand strategic dispersion. For a weaker faction engaged in guerrilla warfare, such as Mao Zedong's communists, dissolving into the scenery frustrates a superior adversary by denying them a clear target. Furthermore, total reliance on a single patron carries the fatal risk of sudden ruin should that individual fall from grace, a lesson learned bitterly by Cesare Borgia upon his father's sudden death. While rare, expansive geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci can successfully derive power from vast fluid diffusion, the rest of the world must err on the side of intensity, striking a single target with absolute weight. Robert Greene explains that because power structures inherently organize themselves around a central authority, the modern world functions exactly like a traditional royal court. To thrive, one must master courtiership, a game of political dexterity, appearance, and calculated indirection. The perfect courtier navigates this landscape by altering their language to match their audience, mastering emotions to fake contentment, and projecting an air of effortless nonchalance. Here are some crucial rules. Avoid ostentation, be frugal with flattery, and act as an indispensable source of pleasure. Above all, a courtier must never look desperate for attention, overstep their assigned duties, or commit the fatal error of criticizing a superior's taste or appearance. History illustrates that raw talent matters less than social maneuvering, and unadorned honesty is a fool's game. Callisthenes was executed by Alexander the Great for speaking naked truths, and Beau Brummel died in squalor after joking about the Prince of Wales' weight. Conversely, successful courtiers manipulate appearances to flatter their masters' egos. Architect Jules Mansart secured prestigious royal commissions by intentionally leaving flaws in his blueprints, allowing King Louis XIV to solve them and feel masterfully superior. When direct counsel is too dangerous, clever indirection is mandatory. Ancient Chinese ministers safely warned errant emperors by inserting fabricated natural phenomena into court chronicles, using cosmic symbols to alter imperial behavior without risking execution. Courtiership also demands managing rivals and navigating the traps of overextended ambition. A Chinese crownkeeper was beheaded for placing a coat over a sleeping ruler, proving that fulfilling unasked tasks breeds suspicion rather than gratitude. Furthermore, a courtier must placate competing factions and jealous equals. Painter Jean-Baptiste Isabey satisfied both Talleyrand and Wellington by designing a portrait where one sat in the physical center while the other captured the crowd's gaze. Similarly, J.M.W. Turner temporarily dulled his own masterpiece to appease an envious colleague, and Winston Churchill humored media titan Henry Luce by painting a requested sheep into his landscape. Yielding to others and occasionally masking your brilliance neutralizes hostility and ensures your vertical ascent. To gain real power, you must ignore the small labels people try to give you and build a big, exciting, stage-like personality instead. This difficult mission turns you into a work of art that grabs attention and never bores anyone. Julius Caesar was a genius at using the link between power and acting, making his name famous through huge gladiator shows, powerful speeches, and big, bold actions. Breaking social rules takes a fake mask that hides your real, private self from your public side. Seeing that old-time Paris stopped women from being independent writers, Aurore Dupin-Dudevant totally remade herself as George Sand. By wearing men's clothes, smoking cigars, and leading artist groups, Sand went around social blocks and charmed the public, later moving into wild politics whenever her act felt like it might get boring. Good self-making needs total control over your feelings. Acting like an open book brings public meanness, while a strong actor shows off planned emotions whenever they want. Like Abraham Lincoln, who used his country boy image to become president, or Velázquez, who showed his art power over kings, you must pick your own look to build your power base. Keeping people interested needs careful planning of speed, suspense, and variety over time. Franklin D. Roosevelt used dramatic changes during the Great Depression by staying quiet before starting his super-fast 100 days of new law. By using a grand gesture, which means a bold, final action like Cleopatra rolling herself out of a rug, you boost your status. Plus, you must stay flexible, changing your mask to fit the moment just like Otto von Bismarck did. Since you cannot undo this rule once you start, the only real danger is acting too much or becoming silly, which breaks the magic. Even looking like you are being yourself takes planned work, making self-creation a must-have for power. A perfect reputation for doing a good job and being polite is needed to keep power. Since mistakes always happen, powerful rulers must protect themselves from anger by using fall guys to take the blame. Saying sorry or making excuses makes people doubt you, but quickly swapping in a helper keeps you looking perfect. This trick takes a cold, heartless mind. General Teo stopped a soldier rebellion by killing his innocent food boss for low rations, moving the army's anger onto a helpless victim. Also, Cesare Borgia used a mean helper to clean up a wild land, then killed him in public once peace returned. Showing the helper's cut-off head pleased the crowd, turned away the hate, and made Borgia look like a kind savior. Besides hiding mistakes, a leader must use helpers to do dangerous or dirty jobs, keeping their own hands completely clean. Taken from the old story where a monkey uses a cat's paw to grab hot food from a fire, this trick lets the master planner get the prizes while others get burned. Cleopatra used this trick like a weapon by making powerful Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony act as her personal hitmen. By charming them, She got these Roman leaders to get rid of her rival brothers and sisters and crush her enemies, locking in her single rule over Egypt without ruining her royal name. In the same way, Mao Zedong used the invading enemy army as a tool to crush his rivals during a big Chinese war, saving his own soldiers to easily win everything later. Whether planning secret tricks through a loyal friend or using a rare vase to quietly pay off a proud friend's debt, the main rule stays the same. The person in power must never look like the cause of mean acts or failure. Since people naturally look for outside things to blame, the crowd easily believes these fake setups. To rule well, you must act like a master magician, making sure only perfect results are seen while the hurt helpers stay safely hidden. Robert Greene says that because humans have a deep need to believe in something, making a group of super loyal followers is the best path to total power. This takes a 5-step plan. First, keep things simple and unclear, using fuzzy words to promise huge life changes. Second, focus on sights and feelings, putting on big dramatic shows to stop people from doubting you. Third, copy the styles of regular religions, using special titles, routines, and rank levels to make people obey. Fourth, hide where your money comes from, acting like your rich lifestyle proves your system works instead of your followers' pockets. Finally, create an us against them feeling, bringing the group together against a made-up outside enemy to protect the group from outside blame. To get tons of power, a leader must match the deep daydreams of people who believe things too easily. By running the show, picking the routines, and asking for willing sacrifices, the leader gets total love, reaching a level where they are adored and can do no wrong. Being shy is naturally dangerous. Any waiting or doubting yourself will always ruin your plans and bring bad luck, because people have a basic radar for spotting weakness. Showing you are ready to give in or back down just invites attacks. For example, lions naturally circle the scared prey. Starting something with big bravery, though, creates a magic trick that hides your flaws, scares others, and gives you instant power if a brave causes a mistake. History often shows that the giant size of a brave move can freeze a smart mind. Trickster Count Victor Lustig famously sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal. When the buyer doubted, Lustig did not run away but instead bravely asked for a secret bribe, a move so daring it brought back the buyer's trust. In the same way, after years of pretending to obey like a weak orphan, 13-year-old Ivan the Terrible suddenly told his guards to feed the top noble prince to the king's hunting dogs. Even the unknown servant Pietro Aretino became super famous by writing a mean secret joke about the Pope and his leaders, proving that attacking a huge target gets you huge attention. In the end, boldness must be used as a smart tool rather than a way of thinking all the time. Whether choosing a crazy high price in a deal or completely wrapping a partner up in charm, a planned burst of pure boldness forces real life to bend to or will. However, uncontrolled boldness leads to mean cruelty and social ruin. The real master of power uses bravery on purpose, knowing when to move with full speed and when to pretend to be shy to trick proud enemies into a deadly trap. The biggest secret to winning is the ability to plan all the way to the end. Because human beings are naturally led by their feelings, they often mistake fuzzy, happy wishes for a real plan, making things up as they go through quick problems while ignoring future results. This mistake of not seeing faraway dangers always leaves the door open for enemies to steal the credit or for sudden bad luck to ruin their hard work. For example, the explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa bravely found the Pacific Ocean, but because he lacked a solid, long-term plan to protect his winds from political enemies, he was easily outsmarted and put to death, letting others take credit for his work. On the other hand, true masters of power act like they can see everything by looking past right now and figuring out the final moves on a chessboard. Otto von Bismarck successfully brought Germany together under Prussian rule by planning a series of very careful, strictly small wars. Because Bismarck had a perfectly clear picture of his finish line, he showed the massive, almost superhuman control needed to know exactly when to stop strongly fighting the tempting. By carefully thinking about every bit of bad luck, surprise result, and greedy enemy before taking a single step, a smart planner completely gets rid of the scary worry of making things up on the spot. While changing your moves is needed to fit a changing world, keeping a completely solid focus on a real final goal is the only way to control your future and keep lasting power. To maintain power, your accomplishments must appear completely natural and executed with effortless grace. True masters carefully concealed the immense toil, meticulous practice, and clever tricks behind their success, creating the illusion of boundless, untapped capability. Exposing the mechanics of your achievements destroys their magic and invites others to view you as merely human. Historically, this principle manifested as sprezzatura, a calculated nonchalance. In the Japanese tea ceremony, Master Sen no Rikyu despised visible effort, asserting that true beauty must feel spontaneous rather than contrived. Similarly, the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini spent a lifetime researching locks and conditioning his body. Yet he masked this exhausting preparation behind a facade of superhuman ease on stage. He even actively outmaneuvered rivals who attempted to expose his methods, ensuring his secrets remained hidden. By withholding your shortcuts, you prevent others from using your own tactics against you. While a rare, planned disclosure can occasionally engage an audience, maintaining a sense of mystery remains paramount. When your actions seem easy, people believe you possess an exclusive gift and could achieve even greater feats if pushed, inspiring a powerful combination of admiration and fear. The most effective deceptions grant others the illusion of choice, transforming them into willing puppets. By structuring options so that every outcome serves your purpose, you force targets to select between the lesser of two evils or to chase a carefully dangled reward. Because humans possess an inherent dread of unlimited freedom, they find comfort in a restricted array of choices, rarely realizing that the game itself is rigged. Historically, this tactic proved highly effective for leaders and seducers alike. Ivan the Terrible secured absolute autocratic power by abruptly abdicating, forcing a panicked Russian populace to choose between catastrophic anarchy or his unchecked dictatorship. Similarly, the French courtesan Ninon de L'Enclos manipulated her suitors by establishing a dual system of paying clients and platonic admirers. Both groups willfully participated because the arrangement preserved their masculine pride while entirely fulfilling her financial and social desires. Whether by manipulating an insecure superior with colored choices or backing an opponent into the horns of a dilemma, controlling the options ensures you dictate the battlefield while your victims dig their own graves. Robert Greene argues that truth is often too harsh and unpalatable for the masses. Consequently, immense power belongs to those who can manufacture compelling fantasies. People naturally recoil from realities that demand slow, arduous effort, choosing instead to believe in sudden, miraculous transformation. When Venice fell into severe economic decline in the late 16th century, its citizens desperately clung to the hope of restoring their lost glory. A clever charlatan named Il Bragadino exploited this collective vulnerability by posing as a master alchemist capable of multiplying gold. Rather than diagnosing the city's systemic failures, an ugly reality the public would have rejected, he promised effortless wealth, living luxuriously at the state's expense, before fleeing when pressured for concrete results. The efficacy of fantasy relies entirely on distance and vagueness. Whether promising instant riches, exotic adventures, or relief from boredom, the offer must remain tantalizingly ungraspable to keep desire alive. However, strategists must play this game with caution. Getting trapped in a position where you are forced to produce tangible results can prove fatal, as Bragadino discovered when his failure to deliver eventually led to his execution in Bavaria. To wield this law effectively, one must provide a glittering escape from the mundane world while keeping the illusion safely out of reality's reach. Every individual possesses a hidden psychological vulnerability, a thumbscrew, rooted in an insecurity, uncontrollable emotion, or secret pleasure. Because people naturally construct armor to defend against external influence, finding this specific weakness allows you to bypass their resistance effortlessly. Uncovering a target's thumbscrew requires intense observation of unconscious signals, such as casual remarks and nervous gestures, rather than their conscious actions. Shrewd strategists can also look for glaring contrasts, as overt personality traits often mask their exact opposites, or probe backward to identify a childhood deficiency. By locating the helpless child within an adult or isolating the weakest link in a hierarchy, you expose the exact point where psychological pressure can be applied. Once a vulnerability is identified, gaining power depends on filling that emotional void or feeding an uncontrollable passion, whether it is vanity, fear, or lust. Historically, Cardinal Richelieu bypassed King Louis XIII's defenses by exploiting the intense insecurity of the Queen Mother, eventually establishing absolute control over France by feeding the king's childish dependency. Similarly, Catherine de' Medicis controlled powerful political rivals by weaponizing their insatiable lust through a flying squadron of beautiful court spies. Ultimately, what people cannot control within themselves, you must control for them. By acting as the sole provider of their missing validation or emotional needs, their defense mechanisms dissolve, leaving them completely at your mercy. Robert Greene posits that the way you carry yourself directly dictates how others treat you. Appearing common or vulgar breeds disrespect, while projecting regal confidence inspires deference. This strategy of the crown dictates that acting like a king makes you appear destined for greatness, whereas blurring this necessary distance destroys your authority. France's bourgeois king, Louis Philippe, actively discarded royal grandeur by dressing like a commoner and treating wealthy merchants as equals. Rather than fostering loyalty, his false chumminess invited public contempt and completely diminished his stature, rendering his government so uninspiring that it collapsed instantly during the 1848 revolution. In contrast, Christopher Columbus masterfully leveraged self-belief to transcend his humble origins as the son of a cheese vendor. By maintaining a dignified aristocratic bearing and demanding exorbitant titles and hereditary rights from European monarchs, he forced royalty to accept his worth. Because he set his price incredibly high, Queen Isabella treated his bold requests as legitimate and funded his historic voyages. To command respect, one must cultivate an inner sense of destiny that radiates outward, using dignity as a shield against adversity. By making bold demands and avoiding the trap of defensive arrogance, you effectively set your own high valuation, compelling the world to treat you accordingly. Robert Greene argues that mastering timing requires absolute emotional control, as hurrying betrays a fatal lack of self-regulation. Power belongs to those who can accurately read the spirit of the times, anticipate social shifts, and patiently wait for the right moment to act. The ultimate exemplar of this was the French statesman Joseph Fouché, who navigated decades of violent political upheaval, from the Revolution to Napoleon's empire, by constantly adapting his allegiances to the cultural tide. Fouché excelled at managing long time, a defensive strategy rooted in patience. By keeping his cool and lying low during unfavorable periods, he allowed his headstrong rivals to destroy themselves through hasty, ill-timed decisions before stepping in to pick up the pieces. To complement defensive waiting, a strategist must manipulate forced time as an offensive weapon to disrupt an opponent's psychological rhythm. By deliberately making rivals wait or suddenly imposing tight deadlines, you distort their perception of time, inducing panic and forcing critical errors. However, patience is entirely useless without a mastery of end time. Like a hovering hawk, once the ideal window of opportunity arrives, you must abandon all hesitation and strike with absolute speed and ruthlessness. This swift final execution paralyzes opposition and solidifies your authority. Ultimately, there is no reversal to this law. You must learn to dictate the clock, or you will inevitably become its helpless victim. Robert Greene asserts that acknowledging petty problems or minor enemies only grants them credibility and strength. By reacting to an irritant, you entangle yourself in their dynamic and forfeit your initiative. Therefore, the ultimate power move is to deploy total disdain, effectively canceling out what offends you. Woodrow Wilson violated this law by launching a massive military expedition to capture the Mexican rebel Pancho Villa. This disproportionate response highlighted American incompetence, transformed a minor raid into an international embarrassment, and elevated Villa into an idolized folk hero. Conversely, King Henry VIII masterfully utilized disdain when Pope Clement VII refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Instead of wasting energy negotiating, Henry completely ignored the Vatican's authority, banished Catherine, and established the Church of England, leaving his opponents paralyzed and frustrated. Beyond neutralizing adversaries, disdain solves the paradox of desire, as withholding interest makes you appear superior and drives targets to pursue you. It also prevents you from looking puny by engaging with inferior opponents or worsening your own blunders by over-apologizing. You can even adopt a sour grapes approach to dismiss what you cannot attain. However, the public contempt must be balanced with private vigilance. Ignoring a rising threat can allow it to fester into a catastrophe. Ultimately, treating an annoyance with aristocratic indifference denies it existence, ensuring you dictate the terms of any conflict. Power is intrinsically tied to visual deception, as words invite scrutiny and counterarguments, while striking imagery and grand spectacles bypass rational doubt to target human emotions directly. Because the visual sense dominates human perception, a well-crafted aesthetic imposes itself as an absolute truth, effectively masking underlying motives and disarming skepticism. To exploit this cognitive shortcut, adept strategists align themselves with evocative symbols and mythologies that grant them an outsized magnetic aura. For instance, the Moon Doctor of Berlin bypassed medical scrutiny entirely by treating patients in a theatrical, moonlight-drenched hall where clients were so bedazzled by the celestial spectacle that they imagined themselves cured. Symbols act as an emotional shorthand that unites people and communicates authority instantly, meaning that the literal arrangement of visuals always dictates the narrative. This was evident when General Charles de Gaulle manipulated the liberation of Paris to ensure French troops marched first, signaling independent power to the ally. Ultimately, organizing larger-than-life spectacles distracts the public from harsh realities and anchors authority in absolute awe. Because humanity is inevitably swayed by appearances, ignoring the potency of visuals leaves you completely powerless, and there is no reversal to this law. Robert Greene argues that openly flaunting unorthodox behavior or unconventional ideas is highly dangerous, as it makes others feel inferior and prompts them to retaliate. Society demands conformity. Challenging deeply ingrained cultural norms breeds resentment and isolation. The Spartan warrior Pausanias violated this principle by adopting lavish Persian customs and dress after a military victory. His blatant contempt for Greek simplicity alienated his peers, fueling suspicions of treason that ultimately led to his ruin. When you forcefully swim against the current, you invite hostility because people view disagreement as an offensive condemnation of their own beliefs. True strategists recognize that complete free expression is a social impossibility, making it far safer to mask originality and cultivate the common touch. By maintaining outward conformity, you earn the privacy needed to nurture your true thoughts without facing ostracism. This defensive strategy was executed by the philosopher Tommaso Campanella, who survived the Inquisition by feigning madness and writing books that outwardly defended Catholic orthodoxy while subtly encoding his radical views within the text. Similarly, playwright Bertolt Brecht charmed a hostile congressional committee by adopting a conventional appearance and using ambiguous generalities to protect his true leanings. Power stems from being all things to all people, donning the mask appropriate for the group while saving your uniqueness for a trusted few. Ultimately, defying custom inevitably backfires. To thrive, you must keep your differences in your thoughts and safely walk with the herd. Robert Greene argues that emotional outbursts are a profound sign of helplessness, whereas maintaining absolute composure grants a decisive strategic advantage. In the game of power, you must remain calm while deliberately triggering your enemy's anger to force them into premature, poorly calculated action. Napoleon Bonaparte violated this law when he discovered a conspiracy involving his foreign minister Talleyrand. Instead of neutralizing the threat quietly, Napoleon erupted into a hysterical public tirade. Talleyrand countered with aristocratic boredom and perfect civility, causing Napoleon to appear unhinged and weak. This public loss of self-control severely damaged the emperor's authority and marked the true beginning of his political decline. Conversely, Haile Selassie masterfully executed this law to consolidate his rule over Ethiopia by provoking his rival, Ras Gugsa, into a premature rebellion. By ordering Gugsa to fight an unrelated tribe, Selassie wounded his pride and forced him to march before he was ready. Having already secured church support and bribed Gugsa's allies, Selassie easily crushed the isolated rebel force. By refusing to take provocations personally, you can manipulate an opponent's volatile emotions to pull them into a trap. Affecting an indifferent pose against a hot-headed adversary often causes them to embarrass themselves. However, Greene cautions that you must test the waters first. Provoking an impossibly strong enemy will backfire disastrously. Anger is only effective when it is a manufactured, controlled performance used rarely enough to maintain its intimidating power. Robert Greene explains that anything offered for free usually comes with hidden traps, like secret favors, owed or bad quality. True power comes from paying full price for what you need, because it keeps you independent and free from guilt or control. Instead of hoarding cash or constantly hunting for cheap bargains, powerful people treat money as a tool to gain influence. Obsessing over every penny makes you look weak and alienates the people around you. For example, the Duchess of Marlborough ruined her reputation by stingily fighting over every detail while building her palace, frustrating her workers and losing her royal favor. Similarly, Spain ruined its own economy by obsessing over the fantasy of easy gold in El Dorado, instead of doing the hard work required to build lasting strength. Conversely, smart leaders use strategic generosity to win friends and build power. Pietro Aretino, a Renaissance writer, shared his money freely and gave lavish gifts to powerful lords. By giving first, he made noblemen feel indebted to him, turning those gifts into immense political clout. Similarly, Baron Rothschild spent vast fortunes throwing the grandest parties in Paris, curing the boredom of the French elite and earning their social acceptance as an outsider. Money holds little value when it is locked away in a bank. Its true power comes from circulating it to win people's hearts and minds. Following in the footsteps of a famous leader or successful parent is one of the hardest traps in the world. People naturally remember whoever came first as the standard of greatness. So if you simply copy what they did or live off their achievements, you will always stay hidden in their shadow. To win real respect and power, you have to break away from the past, ignore their playbook, and establish your own unique identity. A classic example of what not to do is King Louis XV of France. He inherited a powerful empire from his legendary great-grandfather, Louis XIV. Instead of building his own path, Louis XIV, spoiled and lazy, spending his time gambling, partying, and avoiding hard work. By resting on the past, he ruined France's finances and set the stage for a violent revolution. In contrast, Alexander the Great refused to live in the shadow of his famous father, King Philip. Alexander chose a much bolder style, famously cut the unsolvable Gordian knot with his sword, and conquered a massive world empire that completely outshined his father's legacy. The main lesson is that past success can make you soft if you rely on it. To truly succeed, you must change your style. Look for empty spaces where you can shine on your own, and always act like you are starting from scratch so you never get lazy. In almost every group, major trouble can usually be traced back to a single ringleader, which is the complainer, the bully, or the manipulator who stirs up drama. Trying to fight an entire crowd wastes time and energy. Instead, Robert Greene argues that you must target the main source of the problem, known as the shepherd. Once you isolate or remove that one influential individual, the rest of the followers, aka the sheep, lose their guidance, lose their courage, and scatter. History shows how effective this tactic can be. Ancient Athens preserved its democracy by holding annual votes to banish overly arrogant or ambitious leaders for 10 years, removing the threat before they could turn citizens against each other. Centuries later in medieval Italy, Pope Boniface VIII wanted to conquer the city of Florence. However, the famous writer Dante was passionately rallying the citizens to fight back. Realizing Dante was the core of Florence's defense, the Pope tricked him into coming to Rome for fake peace negotiations and kept him stranded there. Without Dante present to inspire and unite them, the people of Florence quickly turned on each other, lost their nerve, and fell to the Pope's forces within weeks. The key lesson is to stop wasting energy fighting an entire group and instead focus on the person pulling the strings. Isolating a ringleader physically, politically, or socially strips them of their power base. However, you must be careful when applying this law. If you try to push away a powerful enemy without completely cutting off their ability to strike back, they might return with a vengeance. If you cannot safely remove a dangerous opponent, it is better to keep them close where you can watch them while quietly weakening their position from within. Trying to force people to do what you want almost always backfires. Bullying or bossing people around builds hidden resentment that eventually explodes into rebellion. To gain real influence, you must win over people's hearts and minds by appealing to their personal feelings, fears, and self-interests. When you gently persuade someone instead of forcing them, they willingly move in your direction and become a loyal supporter. Queen Marie Antoinette of France learned this lesson the hard way. She lived in a wealthy, selfish bubble, spending huge fortunes on fancy clothes and private gardens, while her citizens starved. Because she made zero effort to understand or care about her people's feelings, the nation grew to hate her, leading directly to her execution during the French Revolution. On the other hand, the brilliant ancient Chinese strategist Zhuge Liang knew how to soften people up. When fighting a rebel king named Meng Huo, Liang captured and released him 7 different times, treating the captured enemy troops with unexpected kindness and respect each time. By choosing patience and mercy over brutal force, Liang completely transformed a bitter enemy into a devoted, lifelong ally. The main takeaway is that persuasion is vastly more effective than force. True power comes from understanding what makes other people tick and showing them how supporting you benefits their own lives. By using thoughtful gestures, listening to their needs, and tapping into basic human emotions like hope, fear, and love, you can open the doors to people's minds and build a solid foundation of support. The mirror effect is a powerful psychological strategy where you copy another person's actions, values, or deepest desires. When you act like a mirror, you can confuse your enemies, charm your allies, or teach troublemakers a lesson. Because people are naturally self-focused, holding up a reflection makes them drop their guard. They either fall in love with seeing their own beliefs reflected back at them, or they get so distracted by your imitation that they completely miss your hidden plan. One way to use this strategy is by copying an enemy's exact moves to block their attacks, known as the neutralizing effect. For example, Joseph Fouché protected himself from Napoleon by secretly spying on Napoleon's own spies. By mirroring the emperor's secret operations, Fouché hid his true motives and rendered Napoleon helpless to catch him. The mirror can also be used as a teaching tool through the moral effect, which means giving someone a taste of their own medicine. Instead of complaining when someone treats you poorly, doing the exact same thing back to them forces them to feel the consequences of their behavior and realize how unfair they are being. The mirror is just as effective for winning people over. By studying what someone values, their dreams, hobbies, or ideals, and reflecting those traits back, you make them feel deeply understood. Similarly, Marie Mancini won young King Louis XIV's heart simply by reflecting his secret dreams of being a heroic knight. Ultimately, whether you want to disarm an opponent or win someone's trust, reflecting their own world back at them gives you control over the situation. People love the idea of change, but in daily life, we are all creatures of habit. Think of how a cat panics when you move its food bowl or change its routine. When a leader tries to overhaul everything at once, people get scared, stressed, and angry. Law 45 teaches us that if you need to make big changes, you should do it gradually and disguise your new ideas inside old, familiar traditions. A cautionary example comes from 1500s England. King Henry VIII wanted a divorce, so his advisor, Thomas Cromwell, helped him break away from the Catholic Church. However, almost overnight, Cromwell he destroyed beloved local churches, banned long-standing rituals, and raised heavy taxes. People panicked because their daily routines and beliefs were completely disrupted. The country rebelled, and to restore order, the king blamed Cromwell and had him executed. Cromwell forced too much change too fast, and it backfired completely. On the other hand, Chinese leader Mao Zedong understood this rule well. He wanted to introduce a completely new communist government, but he knew the people deeply cherished their country's ancient history. Instead of throwing out the past, Mao wrapped his radical ideas in familiar traditions. He compared his soldiers to famous Robin Hood-style heroes from classic medieval Chinese stories, and presented himself like a legendary ancient general. Because his new vision felt tied to history, people welcomed it without fear. The main takeaway is simple: humans crave safety and comfort. If you ever need to introduce major changes, whether in school, sports, or leadership, do not tear down the past completely. Keep familiar habits intact, move step by step, and make your new ideas look like a natural upgrade to what people already know and trust. People love to celebrate success, but appearing too perfect can make you a target. When you seem to have no faults, bad luck, or weaknesses, it makes others feel inferior. This triggers envy, a dangerous, hidden emotion that causes people to secretly hate you and look for ways to bring you down. Law 46 teaches that to protect yourself, you should intentionally show small flaws, attribute your success to good luck, and stay humble to make others feel comfortable around you. A tragic example of ignoring this law is the story of playwright Joe Orton and his partner, Kenneth Halliwell. Early on, both were struggling writers. But when Orton suddenly became a famous, rich, and handsome theater star, Halliwell felt completely left behind. Orton's overwhelming success made Halliwell feel deeply inferior. Instead of hiding his pride or stepping away, Orton flaunted his thriving life while treating Halliwell with pity. Halliwell's envy turned into deadly rage, leading him to murder Orton before taking his own life. Orton's failure to handle his partner's envy ended in disaster. On the flip side, Cosimo de' Medici mastered this rule to gain immense power in Renaissance Italy. Even though he was one of the richest men in Europe, he was careful never to flaunt his wealth. He rode a humble mule instead of a flashy horse, dressed simply, built a modest-looking home, and always bowed to city officials. Because he acted like a regular citizen, he avoided sparking envy among his peers and ruled the city quietly behind the scenes for 30 years. The main takeaway is simple: never let your brilliance make others feel small. When you achieve something great, whether winning a game, getting a top grade, or earning a big promotion, do not brag. Mention the role that luck played, admit a minor flaw, or share the credit. By deflecting envy and staying approachable, you protect your accomplishments and keep potential enemies at bay. Winning feels amazing, but it can also be incredibly dangerous if you do not know when to stop. Law 47 teaches us that once you set a goal and achieve it, you should stop and consolidate your success rather than blindly pushing for more. In the heat of victory, it is easy to become arrogant, feel invincible, and keep charging ahead without a clear plan. However, trying to push past your original target often creates unnecessary enemies, leads to careless mistakes, and can easily destroy everything you just worked so hard to accomplish. A clear example of this mistake comes from Cyrus the Great, the ancient king of Persia. After conquering massive kingdoms like Babylon and building a huge empire, his constant victories went straight to his head. Instead of stopping to protect and organize the vast land he already ruled, he greedily attacked a fierce warrior tribe led by Queen Tomyris. Cyrus used sneaky tricks that resulted in the death of the queen's son, which filled her with rage. She rallied her forces, completely destroyed the Persian army, and killed Cyrus in battle, causing his empire to unravel. Just like Icarus in Greek mythology, who flew too close to the sun until his wax wings melted, Cyrus let the excitement of flying high lead straight to his downfall. On the other hand, Madame de Pompadour in 18th century, France understood how to handle success wisely. As the chief advisor and fame Louis XV, she managed to stay powerful for an incredible 20 years in a court full of jealous rivals. She succeeded because she never allowed good fortune to make her greedy or arrogant. When her situation shifted, instead of trying to bully her opponents or aggressively grab more control, she used charm, extreme politeness, and clever strategy to keep her position secure. Ultimately, true power comes from controlling your ego and recognizing that success requires careful planning. After achieving what you set out to do, the smartest move is to pause, protect what you have earned, and plan your next steps carefully. Pushing too far out of pride is a quick way to turn a win into a loss, so learning to stop right at your target is a sign of real intelligence. Law 48 teaches that the best way to protect yourself and win is to be flexible and unpredictable, just like water. When you lock yourself into a rigid plan, habit, or routine, you give your opponents a clear target to attack. Instead, you should constantly adapt to changing circumstances. In nature, creatures with heavy, rigid shells often become slow and extinct, while fast, adaptable animals thrive. By keeping your plans hidden and your strategy open to change, you leave your enemies with nothing solid to strike. Ancient history shows us what happens when a society becomes too rigid. Sparta built an insanely strict military culture where boys were raised only to fight, while art, music, and wealth were completely banned. Nearby Athens, however, was creative, open, and constantly adapting through trade. Sparta managed to defeat Athens in a big war. But the Spartans had no idea how to handle the wealth and foreign ideas that came with victory. Because Sparta was so inflexible and set in its ways, its society quickly became corrupt and collapsed. Their protective military armor ultimately destroyed them because they could not adapt to a changing world. You can also see this principle in action through military tactics. During the Chinese Civil War, Mao Zedong used formless tactics against a much larger nationalist army. Instead of fighting direct, traditional battles, Mao's troops moved like liquid, scattering into small groups that ambushed the enemy and vanished into the countryside. His opponent tried to fight a direct, traditional war, but Mao gave him nothing solid to hit. By being as elusive as a vapor, Mao disoriented and exhausted his enemy until his flexible forces won the entire country. To practice formlessness in your own life, you must learn to control your emotions and stay open-minded. Reacting defensively or stubbornly holding on to the past exposes your weak spots to others. By acting like a chameleon, blending in on the surface while staying sharp and flexible underneath, you can handle any surprise, bend without breaking, and always stay ahead of the competition. Mastering the 48 laws of power in the real world is never about transforming into a malicious tyrant. Rather, it is about waking up to the unwritten psychological dynamics that quietly govern all human interaction. Power is a constant, fluid currency active in every professional office, social circle, and political arena. Remaining willfully ignorant of these underlying currents leaves you perpetually vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation, whereas fluency in these principles grants you absolute agency and self-protection. Practical application always begins inward. True power demands profound self-mastery, requiring you to detach your ego, check your emotional impulses, and hone the art of detached observation before attempting to influence the world around you. You must learn precisely when to conceal your ultimate intentions, when to project an aura of unshakable confidence, and when to step back into strategic absence to elevate your value. By paying close attention to what people actually do rather than what they politely say, you effortlessly decode the hidden drives, insecurities, and ambitions motivating those around you. Ultimately, treat these laws not as a rigid manual for cruelty, but as a strategic mirror and a protective shield. You do not need to adopt a ruthless persona to thrive. Instead, use this framework to safeguard your personal boundaries, navigate complex hierarchies, and align your long-term goals with pragmatic self-interest. The most effective practitioner does not bully or connive out of desperation. Instead, they see completely through the illusions of the social game, navigate its turbulent currents with cool precision, and achieve their objectives quietly. By mastering these timeless dynamics, you ensure that you remain the sovereign architect of your own destiny, rather than an unwitting pawn in someone else's design. Click the link in the video description to discover a hidden tool that'll help you apply the 48 laws of power to the real world.